Welcome back, everyone. My name is Meg Kruger. I'm the content specialist with Pioneer Athletics. And today we are joined by Micahel Saaranen. He's with Denver's Park and Recreation. And you might recognize him. He was one of our 2021 Pioneers in the Field members. So we're excited to welcome him back here. Micahel, go ahead and give us a little bit about yourself and tell us what you've been up to lately.
Absolutely. Micahel Saaranen, Denver Parks and Rec. I'm the operations supervisor for the athletic field team here. We manage all the baseball, softball, and all the athletic fields across the city of Denver. Graduated Iowa State in 2014 with a turf management degree, bounced around the MLB, ended up in Denver. But excited to be here with you. Think it'll be some good information, hopefully.
Well, thank you again for joining us. I'm sure you weren't planning on hearing from me so soon, bothering you, but I'm glad I was able to track you down. Your situation is a little bit different than some of the other people we've talked to with our baseball campaign this year, because, we're not talking about one or two fields or even just one campus. You're covering, the entire city of Denver. So tell us a little bit about, what your daily maintenance or what your daily management might look like for one field in that sense. Tell us, give everyone a little bit of background of what you guys are kind of doing over there.
You bet. So with our city, in my team, I have 2 crew supervisors, 2 full-time employees, and we usually run about 16 seasonals. So we paint just about 200 athletic fields a week. And then we also maintain about 90 baseball, softball fields with the city. We do that all with our about 20-person crew. So we have different ranges of our ball fields. We range anywhere from like what we call our tier A's, and that's a clay batter's box, clay mound, base anchors, conditioner, graded fields, everything like that, lights. And then we also have fields that are just essentially just small patches of skin material that's inside of a park just for somebody to go play. So we cover everything, top to bottom, essentially. So our maintenance on our for our home plate specifically, our maintenance changes drastically with where we're at. As far as our tier A, though, that gets probably the most use and most maintenance on it. Daily, we make sure we do our clay, fill in clay holes in the batter's boxes and our pitching mounds daily. It's one of those things where we have just so many fields going that we have to stay up with it daily. Otherwise, we can't really afford to take time to go and completely redo a field. So with that, one thing that is very important for us is, since we don't have a lot of control over moisture throughout the entire day, being that we essentially have to get there, get everything patched up, chalked, and then we're basically gone, and then it gets played on later that day. So with that, we really try to keep things very clean. So when they get there, to make sure cleaning out the holes as best as they can, getting so that we're just putting clay on clay, getting that leveled off. We are trying to work with putting mats down, just some light mats down over the batter's boxes, and having the user groups pick them up. Challenge with that is just getting the user groups and us on the same page of who's doing what, and trying not to mess up chalk lines in the process. But yeah, like I said, the crew, they'll prep, they'll cover anywhere from 5 to 10 home plates a day. So that's why we really preach doing it every single day, so that way we're not falling behind at all.
Definitely. And are these tier A fields that you guys have to rebuild after the winter, or are they something that you're looking at all year round?
So they're definitely something that we're looking at all year round. Typically between our fall and our spring seasons, depending on snow and everything like that, we do have our own laser grader. We have our own ABI, which we have a laser for. So we kind of have a schedule of what's been hit. And we'll go and we'll try to laser, not like anything too serious. We won't try to dig in too much, but just a good hard nail and just kind of re-laser that top section of each of our tier A's. So we have, I think, 33 tier A fields. So we'll try to hit about 10 or 12 each off season just to kind of maintain that grade, because that's kind of what's the most important for us.
There ever a situation where all 30 of those fields might see a game on one day? And how would you kind of even manage a situation like that?
Yeah, luckily for us, not all of them in one day. The weekends, typically in the summer, our weekends will get real heavy. We have a couple complexes that have 8, 3, 5 fields. A lot of times those will have tournaments on them in one day. So we'll get in early. We'll get in on the weekends. We get in about 5 a.m. So we'll start. We have headlamps for the crew, and they'll start spinning fields in the dark, just making sure that we can get them all going. And typically on those as well, we try to work it to where we'll have a break the day before, so that way we can get a lot of clay work done the day before. So that way we can just show up the morning of, spin and chalk. So that way we know that everything's ready for gameplay then.
So talking a little bit about materials and maybe your guys's organization's preference, what do you guys typically use at your facilities for, batters boxes, catchers pits, whether that be bricks, clay, or, the natural material that might have been at the field already?
You bet. So on our tier C's, we do just use our natural material. It's probably not the best practice in the world, but we will just try to fill with what's there, just because there are a lot. But if anything starts getting too out of hand, we have a stockpile of infield mix that we'll take there and make sure that we'll only do that probably about once or twice a year. But for the tier A's, for our actual clay and batters boxes, I found that with our lack of control of moisture throughout the day, the number and just kind of seasonal, not necessarily, being training them up as best as we can, but not necessarily having as much knowledge and experience that, typically a bigger field would have, that just going straight bag clay seems to work the best. I would like to maybe start experimenting with bricks in the catcher's pits, just because that does wear a little bit slower. But I have found that, with those bricks, you do have to really make sure you get them to join together properly, and really fill in those gaps and stuff. And for us, this doesn't necessarily get done the best. So when when we rebuild every field, we'll make sure we go about 4 inches deep with the batters boxes and catcher's pit. And then we'll just use bag clay. We just find it, and we don't necessarily, a lot of our fields are youth fields and, just adult softball leagues as well. So they don't necessarily dig in a ton. And since it's a lot of the times it's not the, moisture is not where we want it. So it's going to be pretty hard anyway. So they're not leaving huge holes. So it's easier for us to just go throw a couple handfuls in every day than try to, in case a brick would blow out or anything like that. So we found that just bag clay works the best. And then we usually leave about one thing we do try to do to help with the moisture is we'll leave about a 1/4 inch, the clay about a 1/4 inch low, and then we'll cover that with our infield mix and conditioner. So that way we can wet that clay down real nice, get that moisture real deep, and then we'll cover that up to try to hold that as long as we can. But it is tricky. I try to tell the new people coming in, and even our seasonals have been around and are full-time, that baseball is such a weird sport where it has infield mix, clay, conditioner, and grass, and they're all touching, they're all together, but they don't like being mixed. So, you get that conditioner into clay, doesn't bind well, tends to blow out. So we sweep them out, and then blow them out with blowers, and make sure they're as clean as we can. So that way we have the least amount of blowouts as we can.
And yeah, that's great perspective for, an organization that might be limited on manpower or hours. You guys have found that the bagged clay is something that works when you have a set time that you can be at the field, and then you have to move on and kind of keep going down the line and maybe not have the chance to revisit the field 15 minutes before game time or whatever that might look like. So that's
For
great
sure.
perspective. So you've touched a little bit on, what your game day practices might be or what that daily maintenance looks like. Is there anything that you're on like a quarterly or a monthly schedule to make sure that you're checking back in these fields and maybe performing management or maintenance practices on a monthly or quarterly basis?
You bet. So we have our 3 seasons: summer, spring, fall. So in between, our summers are usually pretty light on the athletic field side and more heavy on the baseball, softball. So we will take time and not necessarily do anything too crazy, but just do a quick round, mostly checking like baseball mounds, just because, just making sure those are still at our 10 inches, making sure that the landing areas and everything like that are still up to snuff. And then also with our fast pitch fields, making sure that the back of the rubber, where that foot gets planted, making sure that's where it needs to be. But I'd say, so about every 3 times a year, we'll just do kind of a high level check just to make sure we're where we need to be. We don't, at that point, we're still going pretty strong with our schedule, so we don't want to start ripping anything too severely. If it needs it, we'll do it, but we try to hold off to the off season. At the end of the year, every year we will go back and kind of, not necessarily a total rebuild, but rebuild our mounds for sure. Just making sure the infield mix on the sides and everything is where it needs to be. Make sure the slope. We can't necessarily check the slope every day. That's another thing that we do kind of every season. Or if there's a break at all, we will go try to check that slope, make sure we're somewhere near where we need to be. But at the end of the year, we'll go through, and if we notice, if we have, one field that's been giving us problems a lot during the year, we might revisit that in the off season and maybe just blow that one up and just kind of, completely strip that side of it, maybe take 2 inches out of it, getting that infield mix, conditioner. No matter how careful you are going to get, stuff in there. So if we do have problems somewhere, we notice that we haven't, done that for a while, we'll go and we'll strip out the 2 top inches and just kind of restart on that side. And then, like I kind of mentioned earlier, with our infield mix on our C fields, we will go on our more highly used fields that we know get a lot of use, and we'll go with infield mix and go and kind of fill those holes in and make sure that we're packing in there.
In the circumstance that you do have to rebuild a field or do a complete reconstruction on any of the mounds or the home plate areas at the end of the season or at the start of the season, what does that really look like labor wise? Is that something that's affecting your overall schedule? Is it something that really puts a pain point in your your labor force, or is that something that you try to allot for way ahead of time?
So that's definitely something during the season, it can be a real pinch if something does emergency happen, just because we do have so many things that we're touching in a week with limited crew. So there is a lot of shuffling there, but we do try to schedule that out quite a ways ahead. I have all my spreadsheets with all my dates of when we have last touched something. So I can kind of see, hey, we haven't been here in like a few months, or we haven't revisited this in a while, so we'll go to those first. But we will try to schedule that out as best as we can, and we do try to wait till the end of the year because generally, everything's based off budget. But we will try to keep our seasonal employees a couple weeks after the season ends to help out with that, because otherwise it would just kind of be the 5 of us trying to do all that. So we will try to keep them for a couple weeks after the year for that very reason, so that we can go to some athletic fields, do some work there, so that we can schedule out, blowing up a batter's box or rebuilding mounds. And then we typically bring seasonals back as well, probably 2 to 3 weeks before the season starts, again, for that reason. So we usually bring people back. With the city of Denver, we're usually the first to hire, just because even when there's snow on the ground, we'll go out and shovel snow so that we can start rebuilding mounds. So it's definitely something that we definitely have in the schedule for the fall and spring.
And what kind of practices are you guys doing when you're putting a field to bed for the season? You know, I know there's different tiers, but are there any fields that, you know, you're putting to bed to make sure that you have the best foot forward come springtime?
Yeah, so we'll do a heavy nail, do a nice drag. We necessarily won't have time to laser everything, but we will try to do a heavy nail on everything. We have infield irrigation on, I think, 30 of our tier A's, so we'll blow all those lines out, make sure that's done. Like I said, heavy nail, and then we'll roll everything. Like to roll everything at least 2 directions. We have our own roller, which is very nice. So we'll right behind each other, we'll just send one crew out with nails, and then another crew with rakes, tamping edges. And then we also have like a vibrator plate compactor that we use. So we'll do that like on our clay areas just to really make sure that, because the last thing we want is a bunch of freeze thaw, having a bunch of cracks in our clay, just because we don't have tarps or anything like that that we can use. So we just really try to compact everything as we possibly can. Make sure we don't want to leave the holes open over the season, over the thing too, because, you know, it's just gonna be puddles, water's gonna sit there, freeze thaw. So we'll basically do a game prep before we're done with the year, minus the chalk. But like I said, we'll try to roll at least 2 directions just to make sure we're keeping as much conditioner down as we can, trying to keep that infield mix where it needs to be, and trying to keep that clay as compacted as we can.
And you mentioned conditioner a little bit in that last question. Do you have any preference on what type of conditioners you guys are using on those tier A fields?
No real preference. We don't like anything too big, or but the main thing that we're going for for our purposes is just moisture. Not necessarily holding moisture either, because like I said, we do have infield irrigation, but just the timing wise of when we prep to when they play, we generally use it just for our purposes, not necessarily for game time purposes. We use it so that we can get moisture into the mix, so that we can nail, so that we can roll, so that you know, we can not create a huge dust cloud when we're dragging. So the conditioner for us is mainly used for rain days. We like to have it out there just to soak up as much as it can, try to keep those fields going as long as we can. So with no real preference, generally just whatever we can get shipped into us the fastest.
You mentioned that you guys have some thunderstorms in the forecast for today, so I won't keep you much longer. But you know, you answered a lot of my questions without me even asking. But are there any final turf tips you'd want to share with the group, or anything that, you know, is a tried and true practice for you know, your regular maintenance routine here?
You bet. I know I've said it a couple times, but I think just staying on top of things, just doing it every single day. You know, a handful of clay is a lot easier to do than coming back and having to dig everything out and restart because you neglected it. You know, it's something that we preach a lot here, is just making sure you're staying on top of it. Just everyone doing their job, everyone staying with it. And then the other thing, like I mentioned, is just keeping, as far as the clay goes specifically, just keeping it as clean as we can. Once you start getting any sand particles, conditioner in there, that clay's not going to want to bind. You're going to start having blowouts. So our big thing is keeping it as clean as possible, trying to do the best you can with moisture. You know, like I said, we're trying to do mats and having people pick up at the end of the day. You know, just experiment with what works with you, trying to keep moisture in, keeping it clean, and just, you know, making sure too that you are packing it in layers. That's one thing I forgot to mention earlier. When we do rebuild, you know, we don't just throw 4 inches of clay in there and start packing. We'll do, you know, an inch at a time, making sure that every layer is packed as nice as we can. But the main thing is just staying on top of it.
It's easier said than done when you're talking about
Yeah.
over 200 fields.
That's true.
Well, thanks again, Michael. We appreciate you joining us. And as always, we we think you're one of the best and brightest coming. Well, you're not coming up. You're here to stay. So
Well, that's greatly appreciated.